I think most people think about things too much without taking action. And the reality is, if you study successful people, they take action. They may think deeply about a thing, but they're going to get into action, get moving, and go do it.
Today on Strategy Shorts, I'm joined by Brandon Barnum. He is the CEO of HOA, and he'll tell us all about that in just a moment. Brandon, it's so great that you've made some time for the show. Thank you for coming to speak to me.
Thanks, Dan. Appreciate the invite. Happy to be here.
Now, before we dive in, why don't you, I teed it up, I said HOA, people aren't going to know what that means, especially in the UK. So why don't you give us a bit of information about what you do and why?
Absolutely. So at HOA.com, what we do is we help homeowners connect with professionals they can trust. We're creating a real estate focused ecosystem for all of the homeowner associations in the US, and then connecting top trusted professionals so those homeowners have resources that they can count on anytime. We want to be where to go to find a pro.
Now, for anyone listening who's kind of familiar with Strategy Shorts by now, might be thinking, real estate doesn't sound particularly connected to kind of the traditional verticals of marketing and brand strategy and freelancing and creative endeavors like that. And the reason why I was really excited to speak to you is because actually you're a bit of a serial entrepreneur, and HOA is your latest venture, but actually you've got an interesting history of setting up your own businesses. So maybe kind of give us a bit of backstory as to your kind of leadership history and business history and how you ended up in this real estate opportunity.
Absolutely, Dan. So, quite frankly, my origin story started in college. I found out that you don't have to be married to have a kid. And at 22 years old, I had a son. And by 24, I had full custody and I was a single dad. I was only making $20,000 a year at that point. So I had to make a change. And I got into the mortgage industry, and I had somebody that mentored me in what I now call the art and science of raving referrals. And I was able to 10x my income over 18 months from $20,000 a year to $200,000 a year. And ever since then, I've been on a mission to help as many people as possible do the same.
That's great. And I think we're actually going to be dipping into a bit of that methodology on this call, which I'm really, really looking forward to. But another thing that I found interesting is on your resume, I guess, is another thing called the Champions Institute, which I thought sounded really, really interesting. So why don't you give us a bit of a lowdown as to what that's all about?
Yeah, absolutely. The Champions Institute is a sales and leadership coaching and training company. We really focus on helping people increase their emotional quotient, their EQ, so that they can close more sales in less time and be more effective leaders to achieve the full realization of their vision and mission.
Emotional EQ is definitely something I could do with a little more of, I think. So that sounds pretty good to me. Now, you've been thinking of an audience you want to speak to today and a framework that you want to introduce us to. As I said, it's in that referral space, which I think is really, really interesting because most people just don't know how to ask for that help or that support. And one of the things that I've been talking about recently is that people really are rooting for you. They do want to help, but you've got to give them the chance to help. So before you kind of take us through that framework, who's the key audience that you want to reach today with this bit of methodology?
Well, this really supports anybody that's in business, whether you're in business to business sales. And by the way, 84% of B2B sales start with a referral. So if you're selling to companies and enterprises, you better have somebody that's walking you in with a personal escort and getting you to the top of the food chain so that you can close more deals in less time. But then also at HOA.com, we focus on professionals who serve homeowners. So what we're going to teach applies to both markets. And you're absolutely right. People are uncomfortable asking for referrals. They don't know how to do it. So we've created a very simple and effective 3-step process to help people ask for and achieve all of the referrals they want. You want me to take us through that, Dan?
Well, before we do that, just what is the kind of, and you might go on to talk about this actually. So, feel free to say, Dan, we're going to cover this, but let me just ask, What do you think the biggest kind of blocker is for people asking for referrals? Because I'm an extrovert, I don't mind
Yeah.
asking for stuff. And I'm sure in your leadership training, you meet a lot of people who are kind of, they're ready to go. They want to ask that question. But what do you think the real kind of sticking point is for most people? Because even for me, I know that it can feel awkward and you've got to find the right kind of message. But where do people get stuck?
I think people get stuck. Number one, they're stuck in their own heads. I think most people think about things too much without taking action. And the reality is, if you study successful people, they take action. They may think deeply about a thing, but they're going to get into action, get moving, and go do it. And I have some people in my life that literally that's a standing joke. They don't take action. They just think about taking action all the time. So, number one, you got to take action. If you want to achieve more results in any aspect of your life, the more action you take, the more results that you'll make.
That's great. I think one of my failures, I guess, as a kind of like owning my own business now is that I almost take too much action sometimes. Like I'm always running on to the next piece of content or trying to set this thing up. And sometimes I need to rein myself in and go, hey, Dan, it's okay to like plan a few steps ahead. That's probably where I over index on action sometimes.
Little ADHD.
Yeah, probably undiagnosed, but maybe I'll find out before too long. Why don't you take us through this framework then? I'm really excited to hear what you've got to say.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is called the art of the ask. And when you use the art of the ask, not only do you feel more comfortable and confident asking referrals, but the people that you're asking are going to feel comfortable throughout the entire process. And it's three steps. Number one, you're going to set the stage. Number two, you're going to listen for the referral triggers. And number three, you are going to ASK to GET. So let's unpack those three steps. The first step is setting the stage. And when you first win a client, before you let them out of your office or off of your Zoom call, what you want to do is say, Dan, before I let you go, can I ask you a quick favor? Now, everybody's going to say one of two things, either yes or maybe tell me more, right? And then what you want to say is, most of my business comes by referral, and I love helping people like you get whatever result it is that you're describing for your service, right? Whatever that outcome is that client has hired you for. Now, I'm committed to wowing you with our service. And once I do, I'd like to ask if it would be okay if I ask you for referrals at a later date. Now, that's called setting the stage because you're not asking them for a referral right now. Basically, what you're doing is you're saying, listen, I'm going to do an amazing job. We're going to deliver the results that you're looking for. And you're asking for permission to win the right to ask for referrals later on. So now you're setting the stage. What's interesting, Dan, is sometimes people are going to give you a referral right on the spot because they're like, oh, now that you mentioned it, I have a brother, sister, client, cousin that needs your service, and I'm just going to refer you right now. So, but let's assume that doesn't happen. You've set the stage. Now, you're providing your services or your products, you're giving them the results that they're looking for. So now you're looking for step two, which is listening for the referral triggers. And referral triggers are essentially a thank you, a wow. It's an expression of appreciation. Wow, you've helped me make so much money, save so much time, feel so much better, look so much better, whatever it is that your product or service delivers to your clients. And really, you can manufacture that, quite frankly, by just asking them, hey, I just want to check in with you on a scale of 1 to 10. How happy are you with the results that we've been providing? Now, if they say anything less than a 10, you follow up and say, well, what would make it a 10? And then you want to help them solve that and improve your service right then. But once they say something great about it, wow, this looks so great. Thank you so much. I feel so glad. I'm so happy that I hired you. Then what you want to do, that's step two, you're listening for the referral triggers. Once you hear those referral triggers, now you're going to ASK to GET. And that sounds like this. Dan, I'm so glad to hear that you're loving the service that we're providing to you. As I mentioned earlier, we love helping people like you get these types of results. So is there anyone else that you know that we could be able to provide the same level of service, support, and outcome to? Okay. So that's the art of the ask. Set the stage, listen for referral triggers, and then ASK to GET. You have to ask them because the ask is the action. It's the way that creates the opening where they're able to say, now that you asked me that, why I actually do have somebody that I can introduce to you. Let me do that right now.
Brandon, I think that's a really interesting approach. What's great about it is it's succinct and really memorable. I get a lot of messages on LinkedIn, lead generation, things like where I think this could also apply. When people are jumping in with an ask or they want to give me 20 leads or they're trying to sell me something, and it's straight off the bat, that's the only thing that they want to talk about. And do you know what? Look at so many of those messages, but somebody who shows a genuine interest in me first is going to draw me to the table to have a more engaging conversation. So actually, although this is about referrals, it also feels like this is something that could be applied to other areas of business and lead generation as well. We're coming to the end of our time together because, as I said, I only wanted to keep you for, 10, 15 minutes. We like to keep things really short, sweet, and practical here on the show. But if you were going to distill some of this down into like one place to start or one thing that you really want to land in people's brains today, something that they can do straight after listening to this podcast episode, what would that be and why? Where would you want them to start?
Well, number one, ask for what you want. Okay, whether it comes to referrals or a date, whatever it is that you're looking for in life, you've got to ask more often to get what you want. Most people are in their own heads. They're so concerned about what the other person is going to think of them that they talk themselves out of opportunities. And so, number one, be brave, be courageous. Ask for what it is that you want. The worst thing that somebody can say is no. And you already have that result before you've even started. So you've literally lost nothing. So number one, ask. You see, my mentor here has a book called Ask. And literally that's the game changer. The more you ask, the more action you take, the more results that you will make. As far as how people can find me, if you go to brandonbarnum.com, you'll find all my links and there's some great tools there as well.
Brandon, well, that's about all the time that we've got for today's episode. And I really love just the practical framework that you've given us to take away and try. And to anyone listening or watching, ask more, ask for the things that you want, put yourself out there in that way. I think that's a great place that everybody can start with. So Brandon, thank you so much for coming on the show and let's speak again soon.
Sounds great. Thanks, Sam.